Most embroidery is done either in a hoop or in a frame. But when you're stitching, should you hold the hoop in your hand or should you get a stand to hold onto it for you? And if you get a stand, what kind should you use? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Welcome to Epida Studio. My name is Elizabeth and I help you make beautiful things with quilting, pochagi, and embroidery. So embroidery hoops and frames are helpful because they hold our fabric taut and straight while we're stitching, and so it helps the stitches not to bunch up the fabric. It helps everything to stay smooth and beautiful. But you can also get stands that will hold onto your hoop while you are stitching. So what is the benefit of a hoop? Well, the main benefit of the hoop is that then you have both hands available to do the stitching. So you can either have one hand on the top and one hand on the bottom so you can pull the needle through more quickly, or if you're doing specialty stitches like couching or if you're using a laying tool, you have both hands available for that. Stands are also helpful if you are working on large embroidery pieces and it's quite heavy, because then you don't have to bear all the weight of that on your arms and your shoulders. Stands are also helpful if you're working on very large embroidery pieces because it just helps you to hold on to it. And this is especially helpful if you suffer from shoulder and back pain, because then you won't have the extra weight dragging on you. Many stands can be adjusted to different angles and different heights so you can get it at the perfect spot for you. And this will help you to maintain good posture as you're stitching so that you're not hunched over. If you're holding onto the hoop, even if you start off in a good posture, over time, naturally, you will tend to lean forward. And so having a stand can help you stay in good posture. So because of these things, having a stand could allow you to stitch for longer periods of time without getting tired. You're not bearing the weight of the hoop, and it also means that you can more easily take a quick break and a stretch in the middle of your stitching without having to put your hoop down and rearrange everything. There are also some disadvantages to using a stand. When you're stitching with an embroidery hoop, you can easily rotate it to change the angle. So if you're stitching with a sewing type technique where you're putting the needle down and up in one motion and then pulling your thread through, you can move your hoop as you go so that you're always stitching from right to left or left to right if you're left-handed. So this is helpful with stitches like running stitch or back stitch, stem stitch, a lot of different stitches where you might not want to pull the thread all the way through to the back. If you stitch all your stitches with the stabbing method, where you put it in, pull it all the way through, pull it all the way to the top, all the way to the bottom, then that is less of an issue and a stand will probably be more helpful. The last disadvantage for a stand is if you are working on really small embroidery pieces in a really small embroidery hoop. The stand has to hold on to the hoop in some way, and if your hoop is very small, then whatever the stand is covering up to hold could be a big percentage of that. So if it's a really small piece, it might be more comfortable to stitch by hand. But the bigger your piece gets, the more helpful a stand will be. So if you want to use an embroidery stand, what type of stand should you use? There are a lot of different options, so I'm just going to talk through some of the different options and what are the pros and cons of each one. If you have a stitching store that you can visit in person, then you could probably get some personalized recommendation. They might even have some that you can actually sit at and hold and see how they feel before investing in it. But also feel free to think out of the box when you're looking for an embroidery stand. All you really need is something with a clamp that can hold onto your hoop or your frame. So sometimes you can find what you're looking for at a hardware store or an office supply store. Every stand is unique, but these are the most common things. The first and easiest one is just a simple clamp. And you can get spring clamps like this, or you can get C clamps that you wind down, but a simple clamp that you use to clamp your embroidery onto the table, and then it will hold your piece as you are stitching. This is a really cost-effective option because clamps aren't too expensive, and all you need is a clamp and something to clamp it onto. This is portable, so it's great if you want to move around. So if you travel with your embroidery, this is really easy to bring with you. The disadvantage of clamps is that they might not be as sturdy, especially for large embroidery hoops, and they are less adjustable. If your embroidery is clamped onto a table, you can't easily change the height of it or even the angle. It's going to be pretty flat with the table. Also with clamps, it's more difficult to get to the back of your stitching. If you want to turn your piece over, you have to unclamp it every time you want to get to the back of the stitching. So that could be a problem. And if you have arthritis or problems with your hand muscles, then a clamp actually could be really painful. So clamps are great for a temporary stand, or if you want something really portable, or if you're just getting started with embroidery. But if you try stitching with the clamp on the edge of the table and you really like having to stitch with both hands free, then you might want to start thinking about investing in a bigger stand. So one type of stand is a frame stand. I've been talking about embroidering in hoop, but you can also embroider in a frame. And often these have scroll rods that your fabric wraps on. And this is really good if you're doing a really large piece or a really long piece, because then you don't have to worry about hoop marks in your fabric. You can stitch a section and then roll the scrolls along to the next section and then stitch the next section. And some frames have actual stands that come built in. So it has holes in it that it will attach. And so just like this picture, the frame has a stand that is built in. It can just stand right on the floor. It's similar to a quilt frame. And you could actually use a big quilt hoop with a frame if you had a really large embroidery piece that you wanted to make. When you factor in the price of the frame itself, these stands are usually not too expensive. The main issue with the frame stand is it's not very versatile and it's not very adjustable. So they work really well with big pieces of fabric. But if you're working on a small piece of embroidery, then a big frame stand is kind of overkill. You need a pretty big piece of fabric to put into the frame. Also, these tend to have only one height. So you can find a chair that works for you, but then you're committed to always sitting in that chair at one spot. If you are very tall or very short, then it could be awkward. Also, it's difficult to move around. So if you do all your stitching in one place, in one seat, then that's not a problem. But if you want to move even to different rooms in your house, it can sometimes be awkward to move. So that is a frame stand. The next one I'm going to talk about is a table stand. And just like it sounds, a table stand is a stand that sits on top of your table and holds your hoop. Now this sample that I have, it has 2 clamps. So I would just loosen it and then I can put my hoop in both sides and tighten it. And some table stands have only 1 clamp, and it might be at the side, it might be at the back. There's a lot of different designs for these, and they're usually pretty portable and pretty adjustable. On this one, I can move these arms closer and further together so it adapts to different sizes of hoops. So this is really helpful for many different sizes of stitching, whether it's small or large. So table stands are really portable and adjustable. You can easily move them to a different place. You can change the angle that you're stitching at. If you have a YouTube channel, a table stand is really helpful for holding your hoop as you're recording stitching. And if you have a standing desk or a table that you can raise, This is probably the easiest option to use if you want to stitch while you're standing up. This can be healthy for all the same reasons that standing desks are. But the main disadvantage of a table stand is you have to have a table. So if you wanted to go embroider in the rec room while you're watching TV, then it might be more awkward to do that. And so that leads me to the next type of stand, which is a close cousin to the table stand, and that is the lap stand. So a lap stand is similar to a table stand, but it can be used without a table. Some stands can convert to be both a table stand and a lap stand. Often they have a section that you would tuck under your leg and you sit on, and then an arm that comes up beside you or in front of you to hold onto your embroidery hoop. So sitting on it adds a bit of weight to give it stability. So this type of stand is portable and it's great if you want to be able to move to different chairs and different places, and they're usually fairly lightweight and easy to adjust. Sometimes, however, they're uncomfortable and it is a bit more difficult to take a break from stitching. If you just want to stand up and have a little stretch, it's awkward if you have to climb out of your stand and then take a stretch and then sit back down getting into the stand. You're almost attached to your stitching, so it takes a little bit more effort. So the last type of stand I'm going to talk about is a floor stand. So floor stand is the pinnacle of embroidery stands. Floor stands are standalone units that, as it sounds like, they sit right on the floor, and they have all kinds of attachments for holding onto hoops or embroidery frames. So these are usually the most expensive options, but they have many benefits. So just a little note about floor stands: not all are created equally. Some floor stands are beautifully crafted out of special wood and they're very well made. Other stands work just as well, but they're maybe not as smooth and finished and aesthetically pleasing. And then other stands are really cheaply made and they might be frustrating to work with. So if you see a stand online and it looks like a bargain because it's only $15, just remember that sometimes what you pay is what you get. A floor stand is a big investment, but a good stand will last for your whole lifetime of stitching. Most floor stands have a lot of adjustable pieces so that you can easily find the right height and the right angle for what you're stitching on. Now, some floor stands have a lot of extra attachments you can get. So you can clip on lights or magnifiers or a pattern holder or even thread holders. And so it becomes a whole embroidery station. And this can make it really comfortable to stitch for long periods of time. And you can stand up and come back and pick up right where you left off. So in my personal opinion, the most beautiful floor stands are made of wood, but you can also get stands that are made of metal or made of plastic. And if you enjoy building things, there are lots of instructions online to be able to make your own. So the main disadvantage of a floor stand is that it is less portable. They can be as much or even more awkward to move than frame stands. So if being able to move your stand around is important to you, then keep that in mind when you're making a choice. So what is the best embroidery stand to have? Well, the best stand is the one that is easy for you to use. It's the one that fits your budget and meets all of your requirements. So each person is going to have different requirements for what they want in an embroidery stand. So these questions will help you decide which one is right for you. The first question is, what do you stitch? If you always stitch 6-inch hoops and that's the only thing you ever do, then you won't need as much flexibility as if you sometimes stitch really small things or if you stitch really big things. Do you always do large cross-stitch pieces? Then a frame stand might be your best choice. Do you like to switch back and forth between multiple projects? Then you want a kind of stand that will be easily adjustable. The second question is, do you travel with embroidery? And this can mean big traveling, like do you stitch in the car on a road trip? Or do you take your stitching in an RV? Or do you go on an airplane? But this can also mean small travel, like do you take your stitching maybe to a guild or to workshops? Or do you just like moving your stitching between different rooms in your house? Maybe you usually stitch in your living room, but sometimes you'll go to the den to stitch while you're watching a movie. Then you'll need a certain level of portability. And even within a room, you might want to stitch in different spots. So if you have one chair that's your chair and that's where you're always going to do your embroidery, then you're going to have different requirements than if you want to be able to move around with your stitching. So think about the different places where you would want to be stitching, and that will help you decide what you need. The third question is, what is comfortable for you? Just because your friend swears that her stand is the best in the world doesn't mean that you are obligated to use it. Feel free what works the best for you. And remember that if you see an embroidery designer on social media that is raving about the perfect stand, he's probably getting a commission on sales. So it doesn't mean it's a bad stand, but there's no one size fits all solution. So consider your height, what type of chair you want to sit on, what angle you want to stitch at, and then look for a stand that will accommodate all those things. And then the final secret is people that do a lot of embroidery and have embroidered for many years probably have more than one stand. There's nothing wrong with having different stands for different applications as long as that's in your budget. So do you use a stand when you're embroidering? I'm curious to know. So drop a comment and let me know if you use a stand and what type of stand you use and how you enjoy using it. And if you're looking for an embroidery project or more tutorials, I have tutorials, projects, patterns, and inspiration at my website, epidastudio.com.